My master's was 13 days away when brother demanded, "Forget it, babysit." My no meant I sent his Hawaii hotel straight to cancelled. You know that moment when someone tries to steal your biggest dream, your life's work, right out from under you? Well, mine came just 13 days before my master's graduation, when my brother Mark decided my hard-earned ceremony was less important than his surprise anniversary trip to Hawaii. He demanded I babysit his 3 kids, and when I refused, I unleashed a chain of events that changed my entire family dynamic forever. After 7 grueling years of night school, working full-time to get my master's degree, graduation day was finally on the horizon. I'd planned it for months, even flying our Florida grandma, Ella Laner, out for the occasion. Then came Mark's call, a mere 13 days before I was supposed to walk across that stage. He had exciting news. He and his wife, Allison, were going to Hawaii for a surprise anniversary trip, and I was going to watch his 3 kids for 4 days. He didn't ask, he told me. He even said he'd dropped them off the night before, conveniently neglecting to mention this directly coincided with my graduation. When I pointed out these were the dates of my master's ceremony and celebration, Mark actually laughed. "It's just a stage walk," he scoffed, offering me a walk during the November ceremony instead. He declared his anniversary once a year, while my education would come later, adding that his Hawaii tickets were non-refundable. I told him about the 62 guests I'd invited, including our grandmother. He called me selfish, accused me of putting paper before family, and insisted his kids needed their aunt more than a silly cap and gown. He then dropped a bombshell. I was his backup plan, and he'd already told Allison about the trip. He couldn't disappoint her with my attention requirement. Mark even sneered that I was immature to want claps, and real adults didn't need ceremonies to feel accomplished. When I pressed him on finding another sitter, his go-to line was, "I don't trust strangers with my kids, and family should support each other." This wasn't new. Mark had a history of hijacking my major life events. I missed my LSAT because he showed up with his kids, claiming an emergency. At my bachelor's graduation, I spent the entire ceremony in the bathroom with his vomiting child instead of walking across the stage. Mark had customized every single one of my milestones, always making them about him. But this time I had a plan. I told Mark he could drop off the kids the morning of his flight. His eyes lit up. "This would be great preparation for having kids," he chirped, completely oblivious. The morning of their flight, Mark dropped off his 3 kids, Lily, 9, and the 6-year-old twins, Lucas and Ava, at 8:10 a.m. for his 10:05 flight. I told the kids I had a surprise, and they were thrilled. After Mark left for the airport, I dressed them in their best clothes and announced, "We're going to a very important party." We arrived at my graduation site to find all my guests. I promised my nieces and nephew they would be special guests at my wedding. When my name was called, 3 little voices screamed, "That's our AUNT," louder than anyone else. I'd made placards for the front row kids that proudly declared, "Our aunt is amazing and first in the family to get a master's." The entire auditorium erupted in laughter and applause. Lily captured photos with my phone, while the twins joyfully threw flower petals I'd given them. After the ceremony, we headed to a restaurant I'd booked. There was a special kids booth, complete with college coloring books, graduation hats to paint, and umbrella mocktails. My little cheering squad proudly told anyone who'd listen that their aunt was the brightest in the world and had worked hard for this degree. They even learned and sang the graduation song in the car. Grandma Ella Laner, beaming, handed them sweet certificates and honorary degrees. Everyone made the kids feel like VIPs at an adult party, and they were absolutely loving it. Meanwhile, back in Hawaii, Mark and Allison arrived at their hotel to find their reservation canceled. See, the kids attending my graduation? I considered that an emergency. So, using Mark's credit card, the one he gave me for kid emergencies, I canceled his booking. A last-minute motel change cost them double. My phone started buzzing, and soon Mark called, screaming. He was furious. yelling that I was crazy, had ruined his marriage, and he'd beat me when he returned. I muted my phone and watched the texts pile up. Lily at the kids' table proudly showed her ceremony photos to our friends. The chocolate-frosted twins made 3 trips to the dessert bar. Grandma Ella Laner, sitting at the head table with my diploma next to her plate, boasted to everyone about me. My best work friend pulled me onto the dance floor, and we joined a group dancing to the restaurant's music. Even as my phone vibrated constantly in my pocket, I was too busy celebrating to look. Lucas taught everyone to floss while his sisters giggled. Ava, twirling like a ballerina, her earnest expression of pure delight, kept me distracted from my phone. The restaurant manager even came over to congratulate me, saying the kids had told him at least 7 times that their aunt was the brightest. My grandmother, a little slower but just as determined, danced with me, refusing to sit, telling me my celebration was well-deserved. After another ding, I checked my phone. 19 more angry texts from Mark. I read the first few, more accusations of being selfish and manipulative, then put it away. The kids smiled through the entire 3-hour celebration, blissfully unaware their father was screaming 2,400 miles away. The restaurant closed at 10 p.m. As I loaded birthday goodies and leftover cake into my van, the kids chattered about their favorite parts of the day. At a red light, I finally checked my phone. 5 voicemails. Mark's first message was so loud, I had to hold it away from my ear. He shrieked every name imaginable, hysterical as he described the hotel cancellation. In the second, he threatened to tell my family the worst about me. The third escalated into mean threats, promising to make me regret my choice. The fourth was a detailed list of every dollar the hotel cancellation cost him, demanding immediate payment. The fifth was a tirade of my failures, including childhood mistakes I'd long forgotten. Mark's final voicemail was the scariest. He'd deal with me when he returned and warn me to watch myself in case I needed proof of his threats. I saved every voicemail and screenshotted every text. I walked back into my apartment to find the kids watching a movie, my hands still shaking, but they didn't notice. Grandma Ella Laner called at 9:30 p.m. on her way to her hotel. I stepped onto the balcony to shield the kids from our conversation. She asked how I was, and I admitted Mark's texts were intense. After a long silence, her voice quieted. She revealed Mark's pattern, how he'd always expected others to change plans for him. She recalled how he'd asked her to delay her retirement party 12 years ago because he was fishing that weekend, and she'd complied, causing half her friends to miss it. She remembered his big request to start my aunt's wedding 2 hours early for his son's baseball game. When my aunt refused, Mark arrived late, making a grand entrance that distracted everyone from the bride. Grandma Ella Laner's voice trembled as she said she was proud of my final fight against him. She admitted she'd been too kind to Mark as a child, giving into his tantrums, and that he needed to learn his schedule and wishes weren't everything. When she said she was glad I had the courage to do what she should have done years ago, I actually cried. We talked for another 25 minutes about Mark's actions and their family effects. Her final advice: don't let him shame you into apologizing. The next morning, my 6:30 a.m. alarm went off, and out of habit, I grabbed my phone. 58 notifications in the family group chat. I started scrolling from Mark's long 1:12 a.m. message, Hawaii time. His detailed statement claimed I promised to monitor his kids at my flat and then, in anger, ruined his marriage by canceling his hotel reservation. He accused me of being jealous of his happy marriage and trying to ruin his anniversary vacation. My mom begged me to call her. My dad asked what happened. My aunt defended Mark, writing 3 paragraphs about how I should have rescheduled my graduation for November like Mark suggested and that family should always come first. 2 uncles expressed disappointment. My cousin simply left a question mark. I read these messages from my bed while the kids slept in the living room. Mark had played the victim perfectly, painting me as a bitter, impossible to ignore sibling. Many family members had sided with him without even asking my version of events. My mom's message was the hardest. She sounded genuinely worried I'd done something terrible. Before uploading anything, I drafted a 15-minute response in my notes. I addressed the family discussion calmly and objectively. I stated that Mark knew I would watch the kids and never miss my ceremony. I then included 3 photos: Lily, Ava, and Lucas in the front row with their placards, petals scattered, and my diploma in hand. My kids, I explained, had enjoyed my graduation as special guests. Then came the evidence. A screenshot of Mark's initial text demanding I skip graduation and walk across the stage. Another showed him saying grown-ups don't need ceremonies and that I was immature for wanting claps. The final screenshot displayed his claim that his Hawaii tickets were non-refundable, justifying delaying my schooling. I sent it. 30 minutes passed in silence. The chat showed 18 people had seen my post, but no one responded. They were likely reading Mark's words in his own voice now. My phone remained silent until the kids woke up and asked about breakfast. I made pancakes, checking the chat every few minutes. Still quiet. Mark's angry letters paled in comparison to this silence. While washing breakfast dishes, I received a private message from my cousin Emily. She said she was glad I'd finally called out Mark's manipulation after years of waiting. She then shared a story I'd never heard. For years ago, for her engagement party, Mark asked her to watch his kids 3 days before the event because his regular sitter canceled. Emily couldn't miss her own party, but Mark insisted family helps. She left her party early to pick up his kids, missing speeches and cake cutting, only to later learn his regular sitter hadn't canceled. He'd just declined weekend childcare. Emily wrote that 6 other family members had similar stories but had never confronted him. She had found relatives who missed important events or changed their lives because Mark requested urgent support. An uncle missed his daughter's school play. Another relative skipped a job interview. An aunt cut short her vacation. Everyone just accepted Mark as Mark for years, Emily wrote. She was proud of my opposition and hoped it would inspire others to set limits. My screenshots, she said, had shown many people how Mark really handled family. At 1 p.m., a stranger called. I thought it might be the restaurant manager about yesterday's celebration. Instead, a man yelled that I'd ruined his best friend's marriage. It took me a second to recognize Mark's college friend, whom I'd met twice at family events. He claimed Allison was threatening divorce over the Hawaii fiasco, and it was all my fault. He described Mark as a good man who simply asked his sister for a favor, and I had ruined his anniversary vacation. After his tirade, I quietly asked if he'd seen Mark's texts. He dismissed it, saying it didn't matter because family helps. I asked him, "Would you skip your graduation for someone else's vacation?" He paused. "That's different," he grumbled. When I asked how it was different, he complained Mark was paying for the vacation. I repeated my question about skipping his master's after 7 years of night school and 62 invited guests to babysit. He went silent, then complained I was twisting things and hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling oddly pleased that even Mark's best friend couldn't justify his actions. My phone rang again. Allison's name popped up, making me queasy. I answered from the balcony, expecting her to scream like Mark. But her voice was quiet, cautious. She asked if Mark had told me to skip my master's to babysit. I confirmed it and offered to email her the texts. She agreed, so I quickly sent them. I could hear what sounded like a hotel lobby or restaurant in the background. 45 seconds of silence followed after I sent the emails. Then she quietly asked, "Did the kids enjoy it?" The question shocked me so much I almost didn't answer. I told her they had a blast, cheering the loudest in the auditorium. When she asked what else the party did, I described the kids' table with coloring pages and mocktails. After another long pause, Allison asked if I had made the signs for the kids. I said I had, and everyone at the ceremony loved seeing 3 tiny kids, so excited about their aunt graduating. Her voice dropped as she requested the images. I sent her photos of the kids, throwing petals and holding their placards. Allison began to sob, silently on the phone. She said Mark had promised her I would volunteer to watch the kids at my apartment, but hadn't mentioned my graduation. She apologized, said she didn't know, and wouldn't have gone on the trip had she known. I told her the kids had fun, but she insisted it was wrong because she had made me choose between school and family. Her voice grew, tears stopping as wrath replaced remorse. Mark had told her I'd volunteered to take the kids and help with their anniversary vacation. He'd made it sound like I was doing them a favor, not sacrificing my own milestone. I then told Allison about the hotel cancellation and how Mark had given me his kid emergency credit card. I considered his children's aunt's graduation an emergency worth the cost, I stated. She laughed bitterly. Can't argue with that logic, she conceded. After hanging up, she said she needed to talk to Mark. I waited on my balcony, wondering how that conversation went. 75 minutes later, Allison called back, shaking with anger instead of tears. She explained that Mark had been complaining for months about how I never helped with the kids and prioritized school. He'd convinced her I was selfish and uncaring about family. Why would your husband lie about his sister? She asked, bewildered. As she listened to their conversations, she realized how often Mark had manipulated situations to make me look bad. He'd told her I'd canceled babysitting at the last minute, when he asked during my finals week or when I was working. Despite my refusals, he'd booked kids' birthday parties during my class periods and wouldn't postpone them. Allison trembled as she recounted Mark's lies, designed to make me sound like a mean aunt who didn't care about family. She admitted she judged me solely on his account and never considered my selfishness. She now realized Mark was lying to avoid asking why I couldn't provide last-minute childcare. She apologized again, saying she needed time to consider her marriage. I apologized for her situation, but she denied any apologetic merit on my part. Hanging up with Allison felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Just then, a call came in, Mark's parents. Knowing what was coming, I let it ring 3 times. Before I could even greet her, Mark's mom demanded I apologize and pay for his hotel stay. She called my unauthorized credit card use theft. After her rant, I gently reminded her that Mark had given me the kid emergency card and his kids attending their aunt's master's graduation after he tried to make me miss it was, in my book, an emergency. Before she could start arguing, I told her I had to check on the kids and hung up. I placed the phone on the kitchen counter with shaky hands, realizing I'd been holding my breath the entire time. 18 minutes later, my friend Brooke arrived with 2 bottles of wine and a bag of takeout. Seeing my expression, she pushed past me, went straight to the kitchen for glasses, poured us generous amounts, and made me sit at the table to tell the story. I recounted Mark's demand, the hotel cancellation, and Allison's calls. Brooke stared, jaw agape, until the end. She then dropped her wine glass and declared me her hero for finally resisting Mark's manipulation after years. She recalled all the times I'd bent to his needs, canceling my birthday dinner for babysitting, working from home for a week when his kids had chickenpox. Brooke said seeing those 3 kids celebrate my graduation was the perfect response to Mark's years of disregarding my achievements. She raised her glass to honor my self-prioritization. My shoulders relaxed as we clinked glasses. 3 days later, my phone rang again while the kids were building a blanket fort. It was my mom. Mark had obviously reached her, and seeing her number made me sick. Immediately, she launched into how I should have been bigger and delayed my graduation for November as Mark advised. Her dissatisfied voice always made me feel 9 again, like I'd done something wrong. I reminded her I'd earned my master's after 7 years of night school while working full-time, and 62 people, including her mother, had watched me walk. She cut me off, insisting family always comes first. Now, she said, my selfishness was ruining Mark's marriage, with Allison threatening to leave him and take the kids over my petty ceremonial concerns. My blood pressure spiked. I held the phone tight to avoid throwing it. I took 4 deep breaths before asking, as calmly as possible, how many life events do you want me to sacrifice before prioritizing myself? I told her Mark had ruined my bachelor's graduation and my LSAT, and this was my time after years of hard work. My mother went silent. Her breathing changed. In a low voice, she said she'd call me later to consider what I said. I knew she'd be discussing sides with my dad. After we hung up, I sat on the sofa, staring at the wall, while the kids played happily in their fort, unaware their parents' marriage was crumbling in Hawaii. That night, Grandma Ella Lehner called again from her hotel. She advised me not to let my mother shame me for graduating. Then she revealed something new. My parents always excused Mark because he was the oldest and there were different expectations, she explained. Ella Lehner described how Mark would throw huge tantrums as a child to get his way. Mama gave in rather than endure the yelling, she said. She realized this was a parenting mistake she'd made with my mom too, and she was sorry I'd suffered so long. Ella Lehner said my grandfather would have been proud of my self-defense. She cried as she said she wished she had stopped this when Mark was young. Instead of seeing him manipulate everyone, her words meant everything. I thanked her. After hanging up, I felt understood by at least one family member. For 3 more days, the kids were with me, still talking about graduation like it was the best day of their lives. They cut graduation hats from construction paper, used glitter, and wrote my name on stickers to decorate their diplomas as college projects. Lucas and Ava practiced graduation, with their toy animals walking across the coffee table while cheering and throwing petals. Lily, my niece, really wanted to attend my doctoral graduation to throw more petals. I told them I was done with school and wouldn't be graduating again. I was thrilled she thought I was smart enough to be a doctor, but she looked upset. Then she smiled and suggested I throw flower petals for her graduation. I promised to attend. Her grip on my hand was so tight it almost hurt. This little kid shouldn't have to worry about this. I hugged her and tried not to cry. That same morning, Daniel, my restaurant graduation coordinator, texted me. He said the party was great and asked if I was okay after hearing me on the phone with an upset person yesterday. I replied with the basics. My brother tried to make me miss my graduation to babysit, but I took his kids instead. Daniel was shocked that my brother would try to make me miss my master's after 7 years of night school. My co-workers, he said, understood how hard I worked for that degree and how much it meant to me. When he offered to be a character witness to prove I wasn't a selfish monster, I laughed for the first time in hours. I thanked him, saying I might take him up on it if my family kept acting like I did something wrong. On the 3rd day of Mark and Allison's Hawaii vacation, Allison called me again, but with a new voice. She accused Mark of lying about my availability and requesting I skip graduation. He initially disputed everything, suggesting I was exaggerating, but she showed him my text conversations with screenshots of his original chat. Mark eventually confessed, but he fought back, saying my graduation wasn't as important as their marriage, and I should have understood. Allison said their tension had ruined their vacation. They'd barely talked in their hotel room. She sounded exhausted and heartbroken, describing how Mark kept trying to persuade her without apologizing for what he'd done to me. Even though it wasn't my fault, I felt terrible their marriage was suffering. Allison then started asking about other times Mark had ruined my big life events. I recounted the LSAT incident, his fake emergency, missing my test date, waiting months to reschedule. I told her about spending my bachelor's graduation in the bathroom with a sick toddler instead of walking across the stage. As I gave example after example, Allison was surprised. She didn't know the pattern was so widespread and long-standing. She realized her spouse had a serious problem respecting others' limits and putting himself first. She said, She didn't know what this meant for their marriage, but she realized it now. I felt terrible for her as she learned these hard truths about her husband and children's father. Later that night, my dad called. I braced for another family unity talk. He began by saying Mark and I had made decisions that worsened the issue, trying to be neutral. He suggested we sit down and talk like adults to resolve this as a family after Mark returned from Hawaii. I appreciated that he wasn't automatically supporting Mark like my mom, but I was upset he was treating this like a two-sided issue when the facts were clear. Mark had forced me to sacrifice important moments for his convenience for a decade, and I had finally declined. I told my dad I'd talk, but I wouldn't apologize for graduating. Fair enough, he said. After we hung up, I realized my dad was trying to be diplomatic, but he wasn't demanding I make amends with Mark like everyone else. The family group chat heated up the next day. My aunt wrote a lengthy message about family being eternal, forgiving, and uniting in times of trouble. She also suggested we sit down to resolve family issues after Mark returned from Hawaii. My phone held the message for almost 3 minutes. Then my cousin messaged, maybe Mark should apologize before everyone else arrives. Her message got 4 thumbs up instantly, quickly reaching 8. No one answered my aunt's unity message. I put my phone away and focused on the kids. That night, I ordered pizza from the kids' favorite place. The twins fought over the last breadstick at my paper plate kitchen table. Lucas stopped, looked at me intently, and asked why his dad was so angry over the phone yesterday. He said he'd heard his mother crying in the bathroom after talking to me. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice normal. I told him adults argue, but everything was fine. He nodded and returned to his pizza, but I could tell he was still thinking. I tried to ignore what these kids were learning for the rest of supper. They should have been having fun at their aunt's, not worrying about their parents fighting in Hawaii. Lily joined me in cleaning up after dinner, her expression suggesting she had something important to say. She really wanted to go to college like me. She wondered if her dad would try to keep her from graduating. The question made me grab the counter. This 9-year-old knew her father's routine. She'd linked his attempt to disrupt my graduation to her own future. I knelt to her level and promised to attend her graduation no matter what. You can be anything and celebrate your successes without interference, I told her. She hugged me and thanked me. This tiny kid shouldn't have to worry about this, and I held her tight, trying not to cry. The next morning, Mark texted me from Hawaii. He and Allison were returning early. They'd cut their vacation short by a day because the tension had made it impossible to enjoy. Mark wanted to talk before picking up his kids. My stomach dropped as I read it. This conflict had escalated since his airport call 4 days ago. I anticipated trouble. I told him to pick up the kids, but we wouldn't talk until he calmed down. I reminded him of his last voicemail threat to beat me. He replied after a few minutes, angrily calling me dramatic. He promised to be civil for the kids. I didn't believe him, but I now had written proof of his promise to remain calm. At 2:40 p.m., my neighbor knocked. She looked worried, saying a man had been driving outside my building, watching the windows for 18 minutes. I thanked her and looked out my front window. Mark. He was in his car across the street, clearly psyching himself up. My hands trembled as I called Brooke. I asked her to delay Mark's arrival and if she could bring her boyfriend. Without thinking, I agreed. I knew Mark wouldn't act out with her big, rugby-playing boyfriend there. With witnesses, I didn't fear Mark would hurt me, but I wanted him to know I was supported. Brooke and her boyfriend arrived 11 minutes later. A knock at my door followed their brief sit-down. I peered through the peephole. Mark's face was red and exhausted, sunburned. I opened the door. He barely looked at me before demanding, "Where are my kids?" When they heard him, the kids fled the bedroom, excitedly talking over each other about graduation. Lily showed him her photos on my phone. Mark's jaw tightened as he scrolled through pictures of his kids, holding signs about their amazing aunt. His face reddened with each photo. The children ran to get their belongings from the bedroom. Mark turned to me. "We need to talk," he said, expecting me to reconcile with his wife. To his face, I said, "I have nothing to fix. I guarded and entertained your kids. Your lies ruined your marriage." My heart was racing, but I kept my cool. Mark's face flushed, and he spoke harshly. Brooke's boyfriend rose from the couch. He didn't speak or threaten, he just stood there. Mark reconsidered his words after seeing him. "Get in the car," he snapped at his kids. Little Lily carried the stuffed animal I'd bought her while the twins ran out with their backpacks. At the door, Mark stopped. "The family will learn about you," he said over his shoulder. He then added, "You'll regret choosing paper over family." He left the door, closing behind him. My legs felt weak. Though less than 4 minutes, it felt like hours. I slid to the floor, knees to my chest. Brooke clutched my shoulders beside me. I didn't have the shocking breakdown I expected. I cried quietly, exhausted, struggling to breathe. Brooke remained silent at first, letting me cry. Her boyfriend waited near the door, whispering he'd wait in the car for privacy. After he left, Brooke pulled me close. "You did nothing wrong," she said. Mark's anger, she explained, was the realization that he couldn't control me. After years of making me feel guilty for living my life, he was losing his power. I told her I was stupid for crying and wiped my face on my sleeve. "You're not dumb," she insisted. "Family is harder to fight than strangers because they know what buttons to push." We sat on the floor for 18 more minutes as I calmed down. Brooke made me drink water and reminded me that Mark had paid double for a hotel while I walked to graduation with his 3 kids cheering. "You won despite his yelling," she said. The next day, my phone was quiet. No angry Mark texts, no wife voicemails, no family group chats. It felt odd after 4 days of nonstop notifications. At 1 p.m., Allison texted me. She asked to meet for coffee without telling Mark. I stared at the message. I didn't expect her to reach out without him. I replied that I could meet her. We chose a cafe halfway between us for the next afternoon. All day, I wondered what she would say. Part of me feared a trap. Maybe Mark sent her to yell at me in person. I hoped she wanted to hear my side, not guilt me about their marriage issues. I arrived 12 minutes early at the cafe, ordering coffee and taking a corner table facing the door. Allison arrived on time, looking exhausted, her ponytail messy, her eyes bagged. She ordered tea and sat across from me without looking up, her hands. The therapist called us in. Her office had soft lighting and plants, meant to be relaxing, but I felt tense entering. A notepad-wielding 60-year-old woman with kind eyes introduced herself and explained the session strategy. Everyone could speak freely. The pattern she noticed, she observed, was disgust. Mark shifted, wanting to leave. "Why are we here?" she asked. Mark jumped in first. He said I'd betrayed him by canceling his hotel and ruined his anniversary. I'd turned his request for family help into a revenge plot. He shouted about the last-minute hotel price and how Allison barely spoke to him the whole trip. He claimed I'd caused his marriage problems by holding grudges over nothing. The therapist took notes without speaking. After Mark finished, she asked why he expected me to miss graduation. Mark struggled to speak. He said he'd delayed it until November. The therapist asked if he understood what a scheduled ceremony was. Mark mumbled, "Yeah, but family emergencies come first." She inquired about the emergency. Mark told her he'd booked the trip. The therapist looked at me while writing. "Take a breath and restart," she instructed. I began. Mark came with his kids, claiming an emergency, but he wanted to go to a concert, so I missed the LSAT. He brought his sick kids to my bachelor's graduation, so I spent the ceremony in the bathroom instead of walking across the stage. My hands shook, but my voice was calm. This master's degree required 7 years of night school while working full-time. I explained that Mark called 13 days before graduation, asking me to skip it for Hawaii. Mark turned red as I listed each example. The therapist asked Mark about these events. He replied, "Yeah, but those were different situations." His response was unclear. He reiterated that he only requested assistance when needed. The therapist asked if seeking help meant others had to miss important events. "Family helps each other," Mark insisted. He fell silent. The therapist called us in. Her office had soft lighting and plants, meant to be relaxing, but I felt tense entering. A notepad-wielding 60-year-old woman with kind eyes introduced herself and explained the session strategy. Everyone could speak freely. The pattern she noticed she observed was disgust. Mark shifted, wanting to leave. "Why are we here?" she asked. Mark jumped in first. He said I'd betrayed him by canceling his hotel and ruined his anniversary. I turned his request for family help into a revenge plot. He shouted about the last-minute hotel price and how Allison barely spoke to him the whole trip. He claimed I'd caused his marriage problems by holding grudges over nothing. The therapist took notes without speaking. After Mark finished, she asked why he expected me to miss graduation. Mark struggled to speak. He said he'd delayed it until November. The therapist asked if he understood what a scheduled ceremony was. Mark mumbled, "Yeah, but family emergencies come first." She inquired about the emergency. Mark told her he'd booked the trip. The therapist looked at me while writing. "Take a breath and restart," she instructed. I began. Mark came with his kids, claiming an emergency, but he wanted to go to a concert, so I missed the LSAT. He brought his sick kids to my bachelor's graduation, so I spent the ceremony in the bathroom instead of walking across the stage. My hands shook, but my voice was calm. This master's degree required 7 years of night school while working full-time. I explained that Mark called 13 days before graduation, asking me to skip it for Hawaii. Mark turned red as I listed each example. The therapist asked Mark about these events. He replied, "Yeah, but those were different situations." His response was unclear. He reiterated that he only requested assistance when needed. The therapist asked if seeking help meant others had to miss important events. "Family helps each other," Mark insisted. He fell silent. Then Allison spoke. Her anger was audible in her steady voice. "Mark had manipulated their marriage," she told the therapist. He'd told her parents she was too busy to visit when he didn't want to drive. He canceled her friends' plans after never calling a babysitter. He lied about our conversations to convince her I was selfish and never helped with the kids. Allison said she'd discovered he'd labeled me the problem sister for years. Mark interrupted, but the therapist raised her hand. "Listen to his actions' effects," she advised. Mark closed his mouth, his leg jumping in frustration. Allison persisted. She said Mark's mom told her he was sensitive and needed extra support after Hawaii. That conversation, Allison explained, revealed Mark always expected special treatment. Seeing his reaction to my refusal revealed a marriage pattern she'd ignored. The therapist asked Mark what he heard. Mark mumbled, "Everyone wanted him." The therapist denied that. She asked again what his wife and sister said about his behavior. A long silence from Mark. He finally concluded that they thought he was selfish. The therapist said their thoughts weren't important. It was about recognizing his habits. "In every example we shared," she stated, Mark put his needs and schedule before others' time and accomplishments. She said this violated autonomy. Mark believes family should help, she acknowledged, but respecting others' refusal was key. This wasn't a help request, she explained. That required compliance and guilt when he didn't win. Mark showed several expressions: anger, denial, confusion. The therapist asked if his pattern hurt relationships. Mark guessed defensively. The session lasted 35 more minutes. The therapist asked Mark why he demanded others' time. His family obligations were unclear, always resisting. She made him consider the consequences of his demands. By the end, Mark looked exhausted. Without confessing or apologizing, he agreed to individual therapy. He must change this pattern or risk his marriage and family, the therapist warned. She stated it clearly. I noticed Mark's expression change. Perhaps not acceptance, but the first sign that this was real and had consequences. We left the office quietly. Allison tapped my arm and thanked me for coming. She added that having concrete examples from outside their marriage helped the therapist see the full picture. I saw Mark walk silently to his car, like someone had popped his confidence balloon. He looked less angry and more deflated. I went home exhausted but relieved. Despite not fixing everything, the session was a beginning. 3 weeks later, Dad called to suggest a family dinner. Just him, Mom, Mark, and me. We must clear the air and move forward, he said. I felt sick thinking about sitting across from Mark at a restaurant and pretending everything was fine, but avoiding him forever was impossible. We were family whether I liked it or not. I agreed, but made my dad promise a public meeting. I wasn't doing this at a house where emotions could explode without witnesses. We chose a chain restaurant halfway between my apartment and my parents' house. Laminated menus, bright lights. Arriving first, I got a back corner table. My parents arrived 6 minutes later. My mom hugged me, whispering, "I'm proud." Dad squeezed my shoulder. Mark, in a button-down shirt, arrived last, looking uncomfortable. He slid into the booth across from me and stared at the menu like it was the most interesting thing ever. We discussed work and weather while ordering drinks and appetizers. No one mentioned Hawaii, graduation, or therapy. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and indicated we should discuss what happened. Mark placed his menu down. His first real look at me since sitting down. He mumbled an apology for making me miss graduation. His voice was stiff, like a script reader. He apologized for his threatening voicemails. He said work and trip planning had been stressful. My jaw tensed. Excuses accompanied his apology. I accepted his apology, but demanded change. I quit as his childcare backup, I stated. He had to politely ask for my help and accept rejection. Mark nodded, but didn't speak. My dad spoke up. After considering our family patterns, he realized Mark had expected special treatment for years. It must end, he said. Mark's eyes widened. He had expected our parents' support again, but Dad persisted. He said Mark was an adult with a family and needed to respect others' schedules and boundaries. Mom apologized for allowing Mark's behavior. She said making excuses for him since childhood was unfair to me. She promised equality in the future. He appeared shocked. Without speaking, he opened and closed his mouth. He was processing that our parents wouldn't defend him. The rest of dinner was awkward, but productive. The rules were basic. Mark would ask for help 14 weeks in advance. I was free to refuse without guilt or manipulation. Our parents would be impartial and not force me to accommodate him. Mark accepted everything, but he still looked surprised. Leaving the restaurant made me feel lighter. It wasn't a miracle dinner, and Mark still rationalized and blamed others, but it was progress. I had parental support. It wasn't perfect, but Mark had apologized. And now, we had clear boundaries instead of my implicit promise to always comply. 2 weeks later, Mark texted me, making me do a double take. He'd scheduled a date night with Allison in 14 weeks, and asked me to watch the kids. No telling, no demanding. Just please. He told me to let him know if I was busy. My brother had used complete sentences and acknowledged my schedule. I stared at my phone, trying to process. I texted back that I could, and thanked you for asking early. A thumbs up, no debt or guilt. Nobody preached family duties. Just thanks and a date. This was typical sibling behavior. I felt weird about feeling weird. A few days later, my grandmother called, proudly. She told me relatives were saying I'd started something. My cousin told Mark she'd stopped last-minute babysitting and needed 9 days' notice. My aunt said she couldn't change her plans for him. Allison and his father-in-law announced my graduation, and his father-in-law lectured Mark on respecting others' time. Grandmother said Mark was learning the hard way that he couldn't force everyone to support him. She seemed proud I'd started a minor uprising. I added, I just wanted to walk at my own graduation without drama. She replied, sometimes one person standing up makes others realize they can too. People were talking about Mark's family grapevine stunts, and they'd gone along to keep the peace. Work took my mind off family drama. My boss called me into her office to congratulate me on my master's. She invited me to apply for a 4-month management position. I would manage a small team and get a big raise. My commitment to finishing school while working full-time was valued, she said. Mark would never understand how validated I felt leaving her office. He'd made me feel selfish for years of schooling. But education had opened doors he'd never have. After work shifts, I studied all nights. I wrote papers on weekends instead of relaxing. Now, they saw tangible results, without ceremonies or paperwork. A package arrived at my apartment from Lily. Inside was a drawing of her school graduation ceremony. Although only I wore a cap and gown, she drew us all. The stick figure me smiled big and she'd written, "My aunt is the smartest," in crayon at the top. The 9-year-old was focused. She cared because she saw my hard work and success. A simple black frame, now, sits next to my diploma on my desk. I remembered why standing up to Mark was right. Every time I saw it, I was reminded that his kids watched and learned to respect others' goals. 6 weeks after graduation, Allison texted me to invite me to the kids' play. Mark would be there, but they were doing family things, and the kids wanted me to see their performance. I agreed. I wouldn't punish the kids for their father's behavior. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents holding recording phones. We saw Allison and sat next to her. On her other side, Mark looked awkward in a button-down. He nodded as I sat. I nodded back. We stayed silent. The lights dimmed, and kids in homemade costumes entered the stage. Lily took her forest scene, Tree Roll, seriously. The rabbit twins waved to us in the audience. After the show, we waited in the lobby as kids ran around with juice boxes and cookies. It felt stiff, like we were trying too hard to be normal. But the kids loved seeing their aunt and parents. That mattered. As we were leaving, Mark cleared his throat and approached me. "Thanks for coming," he said. He added that his therapist was helping him understand why he always put himself first. After doing it all your life, he said, it was hard to spot the pattern. Though still struggling, he was becoming more aware. Though change would be slow, I appreciated the honesty. He seemed more self-aware than ever. I commended his effort. After another awkward moment, his kids ran up and demanded he race them to the car. After waving, he left. Allison squeezed my arm. "Thank you," she said, then followed her family. That night, I browsed vacation packages on my couch with my laptop. For years, I'd set aside money for Mark's emergencies, money for last-minute flights if he claimed urgency, money to pay my bills if I took unpaid leave to help him, money I'd waited to use. I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't back down. I switched accounts and checked beach resorts. Brooke shrieked when I announced our graduation trip by phone. We celebrated my master's degree, 7 years of night school, and learning to prioritize myself without family guilt. After 9 days in Mexico, I felt lighter than I had in months. 9 weeks after graduation, routines were almost normal. Mark sometimes overreached. He'd ask for favors or try to guilt me about family obligations in ways he used to. But when I declined, he retreated instead of manipulating. Therapy was helping despite slow progress. Allison seemed happier when we spoke. She said marriage counseling was improving communication and teaching Mark to consider her feelings before his actions. Her expectations were reasonable. She knew his transformation would take time. Small wins were better than none. My boss called me into her office 5 weeks after our promotion discussion. Spreading paperwork on her desk, she smiled. The management position was mine. Pay raise, small team, more responsibility, flexible schedule. I signed the offer letter right then. That night, I called my parents and grandmother and cleared their weekends for dinner. My reward. We met at a nice downtown restaurant. Mom hugged me, speaking highly of me. She regretted not supporting me sooner, instead of always accommodating Mark. Dad raised a glass to my success. Grandmother winked across the table and predicted my success. My promotion confirmed my late-night studying and sacrifices. I always valued education, unlike Mark's ease. He'd long ignored my degree for his needs. That degree boosted my career in ways he couldn't understand. 11 months after graduation, Mark's anniversary rolled around again. My phone rang Tuesday afternoon as I organized files at my new desk. His name appeared on the screen, and I prepared myself. When I replied, he spoke more calmly, more tentatively. He requested time to talk. I accepted, still awaiting the manipulation. With Allison, he wanted to celebrate their anniversary at a bed and breakfast 90 minutes away over the weekend. He called 14 weeks in advance to ask me to watch the kids that weekend. No coercion, no assumption. Even though I was free, I checked my calendar when asked. The weekend worked for me. When I agreed, he seemed genuinely relieved. He said he appreciated it, knowing I was busy with my new job. After we hung up, I stared at my phone. Mark had respectfully asked for my help for the first time as an adult. Therapy worked. Maybe not completely, but enough to make him realize when to switch tactics. Mark dropped off the kids Friday night with their bags and a weekend meal and activity plan. He listed their pediatrician and emergency contacts. Allison hugged and thanked me before leaving. The kids rushed into my apartment to see their aunt. Lily told me about her school project on famous scientists over homemade pizza. Since the twins disagreed on a movie, I let them vote democratically. No one mentioned parental conflict. Nobody seemed anxious or worried. Like other kids, they were just having a sleepover at their aunt's. Saturday, we went to the Park Science Museum. Lucas gathered rocks. Ava befriended every dog, and Lily asked about my office job, wanting one too. We played board games, ate ice cream, and watched cartoons late. Sunday morning, the kids helped me flip pancakes. We were exhausted, but happy when Mark and Allison picked them up after crafts and reading. Allison pulled me aside while Mark loaded the kids into the car. Not in years had she looked so calm. Their weekend away was perfect, she said. They'd reunited without kids or stress. Her next statement shocked me. She said Mark was trying hard. Counseling had taught him that others' schedules and feelings mattered. He sometimes performed old habits, sometimes put himself first. But when she called him out, he stopped and thought instead of defending himself. She said progress was slow but real. He was learning to consider others' feelings before making decisions. She squeezed my hand and thanked me for opposing him at graduation. It had been their family's wake-up call, she said. 8 months after graduating, I was leaving the grocery store with 2 bags when someone called my name. I turned and saw a man approaching. It took me a second to recognize him. Mark's college friend, the one who'd called to yell at me about ruining Mark's marriage. My stomach sank. His discomfort was evident from a few feet away. He wanted an apology. He'd only heard Mark's side and called me without details. Mark, he said, had discussed therapy and manipulation. He realized he'd seen Mark do similar things with other friends over the years, making plans and changing them last minute, expecting people to drop everything and getting angry when they declined. He had dismissed it as Mark being Mark, but now he saw it as a problem. He apologized again and asked for forgiveness for jumping to conclusions. I appreciated the apology and was glad Mark was improving. I walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in months after saying goodbye. I was best engaged by my new job. My promotion gave me interesting projects and a team that valued my input. I had my own windowed office. I could schedule well. Studying until midnight had stopped. I had time for friends, hobbies, and me. One afternoon, while reviewing a report, I noticed something. Defying Mark and keeping my graduation had caused a chain reaction that resolved deep-seated family issues. The kids saw adults respecting and setting boundaries. They learned to say no and valued achievements without demanding sacrifice. Family support now meant supporting each other's milestones. After Mark was honest, Allison felt more confident in her marriage. My parents treated Mark and me equally, not expecting me to accommodate him. Even extended family had started limiting Mark. Sometimes family gatherings were still tense. Mark occasionally acted entitled. But now there were consequences. People confronted him, and I confronted him, guilt-free. Sometimes I relived graduation day. 3 children shouting, "That's our aunt!" as I crossed the stage, the whole auditorium clapping and laughing. Grandmother giving them honorary degrees. I finished something I worked 7 years for. And kids were proud. That memory reminded me every single day that I'd made the right choice, that I deserved to celebrate my successes without guilt, and that real family support means respecting each other's big moments instead of treating them like inconveniences.